Today, we're joined by Erin Lebacqz, who spent 25 plus years teaching people how to make their words actually do something besides take up space on a page. She's worked with some huge brands that swear her methods have transformed how they connect with their audiences. She's here to rescue us from AI-generated robot speak and show us how strategic language choices can turn our content from meh to take my money without sacrificing our authentic voice. So please welcome to Dealcasters, Erin Lebacqz. Welcome aboard, Erin. We're excited to have you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here with you guys. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming to our live stream. I'm really excited and hope to hear from you in the chat if you've got something to say.
This is like the first of many live streams we hope for you, Erin. And one of the big reasons why we do this, which we didn't share with you before you showed up, is this is free consulting for us. So maybe we'll send you an invoice. We'll send you an invoice later. No, I'm kidding. But I wanted to start off with this because I mentioned in the introduction here, I saw a webinar with you, and I know I've had you on other shows that I produce as a guest, and was just knocked out by the value that you brought to the webinar, but also as a guest on those shows. And that really sparked, that webinar especially resonated with me because you talked about AI and how AI is really missing the empathy. It's like there's all kinds of zero empathy content that's being posted out there. And listen, I'm guilty myself of posting content that, unfortunately, I'll go back and look at and feel like it was a robot, and I'm not being empathetic at all. So when someone is, kind of juggling content creation across multiple platforms, it's really tempting, right? To go, okay, I want to create something for my audience, and then you get all this stuff, and you're like, okay, how do you inject a human? Like, what's the mindset? What's a framework that you've got when you're presented with all this stuff? Because I think a lot of times people go, okay, here's this platform. It's Claude. It's this, it's that, it's the other. And then they see all the stuff in front of them, and they don't understand the mindset and the framework in order to deliver that with people. Where do we start there?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great way of putting it, that we don't necessarily know what mindset to be in when we're writing or when we're using the writing that AI has helped us with. And a lot of that, I think, goes back to just how we all grew up writing, worrying usually about one thing when we wrote, which was, am I going to do this correctly, or am I going to get, points off for doing it wrong? So in terms of mindset, most of us have really grown up with a mindset for writing that's all about correctness or completion or word count. And we have not always thought about, kind of like you said in the introduction, how to make our words actually do something, how to be strategic, right? Meet a goal with our words. So it's a mindset shift. And I think the most important aspect of that can help us here is that when we wrote for school, we worried a lot about making our information clear, complete, use a fancy vocab, all of that. But now that we're writing interactively to other humans, right? It's not an assignment, it's an interaction. We have to pay attention to other kinds of goals too. And I call those relational goals. So the mindset I suggest for all of us is when we're writing in this interactive way, like that is a human being is going to use what I wrote to do something, we want to always think about those informational goals. Yeah, let's be clear and concise, but also have that relational goal in mind. What are you trying to get done in terms of the relationship, as well as what are you trying to get done with your information?
Wow,
and
that's
so I
key.
think I think if we approach AI with that, we're looking at two specific moments, and I'm sure we'll get more into this as we go, but the prompting that we give our AI tool and then the editing that we do is what we get back. Those are the two moments where we can use our understanding of the relationship between us and whoever's going to read it and apply that relational mindset, which I think the AI can often do a pretty good job with the information. But even when we coach it a little bit, the AI doesn't know the exact relationship we have with our reader. And so that's something we still want to bring to it.
Yeah. So again, this is great. So informational, relational. right? So I think I've always looked at it when I'm creating something, and I've heard other people do this as well, is like, feed it a bunch of information, see what you get, and then edit it, which is true. You should be doing that. But I think we're talking about, how do we prompt something relationally in that and really trust that we're getting that, number one. So in other words, like, are we giving it our audience, right? Are we giving them the right information about who's receiving it? And do we trust that AI or whatever platform we're using, Claude, ChatGPT or whatever, can understand that and be empathetic, or maybe it can't, and you just like that's where that it's mostly post prompt editing that is adding the relational element, or can we do that in a prompt?
Yeah, I think it shifts depending on how good we get with our prompts, right? And I'm always experimenting with my prompts. In fact, there was the whole sidebar in that webinar, and it sounds strange, but people think about it. Do we act polite in our prompts? Do we say please and thank you, right?
Right.
But more than that, it has to do with the more specific and the more we can understand how to put empathy in our prompt, probably the less we'll have to do on the other side. And if we're using a more generic prompt, we'll probably have quite a lot to do at the end. One example, like you probably saw in that webinar, I had asked, I think it was Copilot that time, not ChatGPT, but I had asked one of the tools to write something about the importance of writing or something like that. And what I got was basically it sounded like a 5-paragraph essay from school.
Yeah.
But I had given it no knowledge of who would use this, where would it be posted, why would a person want it? And so it was very generic. And I thought it sounded, and I think this is one of the issues with AI writing, it sounded very far away. Removed, like just narrating, describing a situation, but not reader targeted.
Yeah.
But then just by making a couple of tweaks, I gave the same prompt, but said for an audience who's just graduated from either high school or college, and using casual language or something like that. And now I received something that was actually targeted to reader needs because AI then understood what situation is my reader in. And just giving that situation made a big difference that took me from generic 5-paragraph essay. I'm talking paragraphs began with firstly, secondly, thirdly, and moreover. Right? That's the giveaway, probably.
Yeah.
There are a lot of giveaways that we can talk about too.
Yeah.
But just by making those changes, I got a much better output. And I've been doing that by focusing on who is it for, what medium is it going to go on, and then even things like length and level of formality, of course. And if I prescribe some of that, I get a better product to start with when I'm editing.
Yeah. I want so much to we should have called this episode relational writing, right? Or how to make AI more relatable, right, Jim? Speaking of relatable, because it's completely forgotten. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people are rubber stamping this content, and they look at it and they think it's for their audience, but they're missing the mark on who they're serving. And I guess there's a part of me that says, well, if you continue to train whatever AI LLM you're using, that this would allow it to eventually understand what at least it'll look empathetic. Obviously it's a robot. It isn't technically, but what about training it? Do you feel like, have you had experience there? And I'm not sure what you use in terms of, you're years and years and years prior, when AI was just a gleam, AI writing was just a gleam in somebody's eye. You were writing with a pen and a paper, I'm sure, and a whiteboard and a marker.
Yes.
But you're not like anti-AI, right? You're like, so I guess I know you have people that follow you, and you have this huge base of people that are not. They're like, the AI is just not there yet. It's not for me. It's not for my audience. But you don't necessarily take that stance. You're not anti-AI. Talk about if you're speaking to someone who, in our crowd, whether they're podcasters, live streamers, etc., and they're looking at AI as a little bit of I'm not ready for this yet. What would you tell them in terms of how they're writing and how they could actually dip their toe in the water? We'll get right back to the show, but first, I wanted to tell you about the School of Podcasting, the #1 place to learn about podcasting, brought to you by the amazing Podcast Hall of Famer, Dave Jackson. I'm a member, and it's a fantastic place for podcast courses, a super helpful podcast community, and unlimited, that's right, unlimited podcast coaching. The link to check it out is here in the show notes, or you can head on over to sop.dealcasters.live and tell Dave that Dealcasters sent you. Now back to the show.
Yeah, well, I would say there are many steps to the writing process, from getting an idea to checking your spelling or grammar. And what we talked about in the webinar, and my general advice would be, look for the step that you kind of feel nervous about and use AI for that step, but not necessarily for the other steps. So for me, for example, I'm not very good at thinking of titles or writing like snappy quips. So I'll think, well, I'm going to ask ChatGPT to generate some titles for me that I can decide from. But after that, I'm just off to the races writing the rest of it. And then I know other people, they've got lots of ideas, but they've noticed over time that they're not orderly, or their readers feel like their writing is not orderly. And so they just bring in the tool for that moment. Oh. And then, of course, you have people who use it at the end, right? Just checking. But I think the idea here is, I don't think we want AI to be the boss of the writing situation, because AI doesn't understand the relationship. But I do think that when we need a tool, why not use it? Number one. Number two, what if it does make someone's writing more orderly? What if somebody recognized, oh, that's kind of one of my fails. I'm kind of all over the place. You know, we all have our writing issues. And they think, oh, I'm going to help my reader by having ChatGPT help me order this. Now we've helped the readers too. And so using it as a tool can benefit people. I also know quite a few people who really get nervous about writing. All the way back from teaching college, I would have people say, well, but I'm not a good writer. And I would say, well, that's impossible, because writing is actually about thinking, strategy, right? Setting goals. But for people who do feel that way, why not have a tool to help you get started? And so I think as long as we keep it as a tool and not the boss, that it can be helpful for both ourselves and our readers. I wouldn't ever want to send something out, of course, without checking everything in quite a few ways. Right. But that's, every time I've done a survey with my audience in various places, probably about 40% of people are kind of like, this is not for me, either because they feel like it takes more time than just doing it. Yeah. Because of checking if it was good and all that stuff. Right. Or they just feel like, yeah, I'm not into it. And the other 60% I'm finding are using it usually in one of those 3 stages. Getting ideas, that's where I use it for like a title idea, is stage 1. Some people even generating the idea or the description of the idea. Third or second place I see people using it is organization. And I think that's a great one, because they may have been told by others, by feedback, oh, this was hard to follow. I didn't know which steps to do. That could be helpful to get a tool. And then third phase, of course, a lot of people use it at the very end, just worrying about either having an error that might be embarrassing, or a tonal mess up that they didn't notice. And they're wondering if the AI could notice that. As Val, hello, thank you so much for being here. As Val is putting in the chat that AI is your assistant. You're the boss, but why not have a helpful assistant if you can? If it's helpful to you. Sometimes I find this will take me longer if I use AI. I'm not going to bother, but sometimes I'll say, yeah, I need the tool right now. I need that assistant to not to replace my voice, as Val says.
Yeah, Val, thank you for joining us. As she says, AI should be the assistant, not the boss. It's a powerful tool to help clarify, speed up, and sometimes spark new ideas, but it shouldn't replace your voice or critical thinking. And of course, she's a super fan, like I am. Yay, Erin. Yes. And Romnos Tech is in the house saying hello, and he agrees. It is a wonderful tool. And it is, you did say something, Erin, that you kind of, you breezed by, but I want to go back and pull it out, because I don't think I've ever heard anybody say this. You said writing is about goals.
Yes. That is something we don't think about. I was probably teaching writing for about 2 decades before I thought of that. So if you don't think of writing as goal-oriented, I think that's common. We don't get raised thinking about writing as a tool to do something, even though we probably do think that speaking is a tool to get something done.
Yeah.
Right? We might say, well, I'm going to invite someone to something and do it in a nice way, and now I'm going to have this guest. Right? And we know that our speaking, we even know to adjust our speaking when we're speaking to different people, because we know, oh, I won't meet my goal if I use that tone with this person. Right? Well, same goes for writing. It's actually meant to be something to help us get things done. Again, I think we've grown up in sort of a culture of fear around writing, the sort of red pen culture, as if writing is really just about being correct by someone else's standard. But in reality, it's a tool of a human being to interact with other people.
Yeah.
And when I'm thinking about, what do I want to get done here? I want to tell my collaborator that I don't really agree with the third idea that they gave me, but I also want to make sure they feel confident to continue giving me ideas, even though I didn't like that one. Well, now I've got an informational goal, tell them the truth that I don't like the idea, and a relational goal, maintain trust, so they'll be willing to share more ideas. And I will use my writing to meet that goal, both of those goals, right? And so that can be a really great paradigm shift, right? Mindset shift to, this is not actually a scary thing that's controlling me and dinging me when I'm wrong. This is me wanting to get things done, and I'm glad I have this tool to do it. I can actually make choices on purpose that will lead to outcomes that I want.
Yeah, and you end up being more confident, and you end up doing it better, right? And you end up being more passionate about it because you're getting things done. It's and this is what I'm talking about. See, Jim, this is why we bring Erin Lebacqz on the show, because again, it's messing me up in a good way, because so much of it is about your audience and who you're speaking to. And now we're just like, how many emails are we replying to a day? Lots, right? And so having AI write those emails, I suppose you can, but why? And so how much of it, Erin, is about knowing who you're replying to in terms of okay, let me just give you, a lot of this depends, right? There's a lot of varying things. But if I'm an influencer or a YouTuber or somebody's approaching me to do something for them, like, hey, I have a product, I want to do this, I want to do that. You don't know anything about that person, right? You're just kind of replying to someone, and you don't know if that person, what they look like, what age they are. You're just seeing this note come across, and you want to be able to reply professionally, but do I add an exclamation point at the end of this first sentence? Do I say thanks, exclamation point, or ooh, that's not professional enough? And all of these things, AI is not going to teach you how to do that. Everything comes in, invariably different. So, and what I've found on your YouTube channel is teachings for this kind of thing, understanding who your audience is. So if you don't really know yet who that is, what's the best way forward on doing email replies or text replies or things like that, and not knowing, is there a way to kind of find out in that conversation so you can feel safe with your first reply before you start to add exclamation points and common language and that kind of thing?
Right. That's a great question. And I had recently a live talk where we ended up on a 10-minute tangent about exclamation points, actually. Yes, it's kind of like I'm revealing my personality here in my writing when I do that, right? And people were saying, I want to show enthusiasm, but at what point am I over-enthused, right? So yes, with replies, I think you're right. I think it would be maybe take a long time to use AI for replies, because they'd have to know not only the relationship, but the other, the message you received and everything. So when you don't know your reader, but you've received a text or an email from them and you need to write back, I would do 2 things to try to figure my way through until I get to know them more. Because once I know them more, I can write to them in an intentional way, right? First thing I do when I have absolutely no idea who this person is or what they may be like is I use the tool of mirroring, and I look, well, how formal are they? I'm going to be about that formal until I get to know them more.
Okay.
And I just try to mirror, okay, they gave me a couple paragraphs and some bullets. I'm not going to go overboard and reply with 2 pages. They treated me like a professional that they'd never met. So I will do the same for now. Probably by the time I'm on my next reply, I'll be getting a little more informal. But you can just mirror what you think you're seeing just to be safe at first. And then secondly, even though you don't know your reader personally, in some cases, you know things about them that can help you make an educated guess. And I think the best thing to know about a reader is the industry that they work in, because industries have cultures for communication. And so, for example, for me, my default is very informal in speech and writing. And most of my colleagues for the first 20 years of my career were other teachers. And it's a very informal vibe. So that's how I am with people. But when I have a client, for example, I had a client in copyright law. Those are some very formal emails. I'm receiving emails with nary a contraction. We're not even using don't and can't and stuff like that,
cannot.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm kind of like, whoa, Erin, you better not just let loose with your typical style here. This is a formal culture. And we could look at that, that's industry culture is what I look at the most often, but we can also think about generational culture and regional and language cultures as well, and try to make educated guesses. But industry culture usually leads you, I think, to semi-accurate cultures. If you work in a corporation or something, you know that even departments have cultures. And I'll go into an organization and they'll say, well, marketing rates it like this, but we're in the call center and we don't send it to them the way they want it. What should we do? So that's another, if you're internal and you're writing to someone, you might be able to think, well, what is probably important in that department? What do they probably prioritize? Can I reflect that in my writing as well?
We'll get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about Stream Like a Boss with the amazing Tanya Smith. Whether you're a coach, consultant, or creator, Tanya's got that magic to turn your live streaming skills into a powerful lead generation engine, transforming those chirping crickets into cash-paying clients with a revolutionary boss framework. The link to check it out is here in the show notes, or you can head on over to streamlikeaboss.tv. Hey, and tell Tanya that Dealcaster sent you. Now back to the show.
And Erin, this kind of ties into a question I had, because you're kind of giving this comparison. So when you were talking about high level writing, is there how long should we be writing? So your example, maybe the copywriters want long stuff and the marketing people want stuff to be short. Is it really, right? Is it about being precise versus just putting fluff because we're trying to hit a magic word count?
Well, that's a great question. Thanks, Jim, because I think it's somewhere in our subconscious is that idea of a word count. But that is not important in business writing at all. In fact, there are very few situations where I would advise adding more to writing. Usually I advise deleting things. I would say maybe up until about 5 years ago, even when I would edit my own emails, I would think, I forgot to say the date. Let me add that. I forgot to explain why. Let me add that. But in the last 5 years, when I'm editing my email, most often I am deleting things. I'm thinking to myself, the more I say, the less they're going to focus on each thing. It will dilute the message. In today's world of noise all the time, how can your message break through the noise if it's very long, right? Often in my classes, we talk about the reality, which is, Chris mentioned, we get these hundreds of emails. But you know what we do with a bunch of them? Procrastinate, right? Look at the emails you receive. Look at the ones you answer right away. What did those writers do? I bet you they kept it short. I bet they put your call to action at the top. I bet they used bullets. Look at the emails you procrastinate on. What did those writers do? Probably had a whole lot of paragraphs. Yeah. If you find yourself scrolling, you're probably procrastinating. And this is just the reality of today's world. So it's a fantastic question because we have this natural desire to be thorough. I'm trying to send you a message and give you everything you need. And yet that desire to be thorough is competing with a need to be brief for someone to be able to find their way through the message, not procrastinate on it and act on it. And that's why I always advocate writing concisely and having things like your main point and call to action at the top, because people won't necessarily see it. Here's a good example that fits with that. That's a writing fail that I did. This one I did after I wrote the workbook, so it's not in there. But if you read the workbook, you'll see that every chapter starts with kind of a writing fail where I had a realization or someone else did. And in this particular one I did, honestly, it wasn't that long ago. I sent someone an email with 2 asks, and this has to do with both length and arrangement when we write to people. I had 2 things that I was hoping this person would do. So at the top of my email, I put the first ask, but that ask required screenshots to really clarify what I meant. So I put my ask and then I put my screenshots. Well, where do you think I put my second ask?
Below the screenshots.
Yeah, I put my second ask underneath the scrolling of all the screenshots.
Oh, yeah.
You've done it. Yeah. And I'm telling you, it crossed my mind. I was like, this might not be a good idea, Erin. But then I thought, well, I always like doing an experiment, so I'm going to leave it. And, I got back a very helpful answer to my first ask and absolutely nothing on my second ask at all. Of course, they had not even seen it, because who would think she asked me something and then gave me 6 pictures? Is there something else beneath the pictures? That's probably not what people are thinking. They're just trying to do the thing they have to get done.
And then we're initially hurt, right?
And so
we're initially hey, they didn't answer my second question. What did I do? Maybe they don't like it, right? Maybe what, but instead of going, how could I have crafted this better, right?
Well, that's exactly what's happening now. Is we are all feeling like, hey, how come no one ever answers my messages? And part of that is just because everyone has a million of them. But really, when somebody doesn't answer us, it's not always them, let's just say. Right? In that case, that was I created that situation by putting my second ask down there. I worked with someone who made a similar change where she'd written about a 2-pager in an email advocating for a new leadership program, really thorough, really awesome. She sent it to all the leaders. She brought in research, the whole works. Nobody answered her. Period. They just didn't.
Oh, God.
We talked about it a couple months later about how to manage which details are good to leave in, but which details you can let go in order to not overwhelm your reader. And she reduced it to where it was probably about the equivalent of a half page, resent that email. 2 of those people answered her that afternoon. And so we're just seeing, reader behavior has a lot to do with writers' choices.
Okay. That was a stampable moment right there. Thank you for that. Thank you for that intentional interrupt, because that's going to end up, on Instagram tomorrow. Because it's a mindset that is lacking, quite frankly, in a lot of people, and I'm guilty of it as well. A lot of people. Speaking of a lot of people, we've got some friends that are in the house. It's Florence, Equip Institute with Florence. Hello. I made it. Thank God that you're here, Florence, because you're in for a treat. And then make sure you go back and watch the first part of this on replay. And Val is can I call you Val? Val, can I call you Val, or should I refer to you as Valerie Beth here? But Val says, write for engineers who appreciate precision and clear specs. Okay, Val, I can call her Val. And then we've got, yes, so just underlining who is the audience and what's their behavior from Florence. And for those who have been here all our lives, make sure you go to highvaluewriting.com. This is an outstanding website. you can browse the e-courses here. There's all kinds of stuff. And like I said, the YouTube channel you're going to have to go to, which is High Value Writing on YouTube. If this can get up on the screen, there we go. And this is... if you have questions about writing anything, this is what I do. This is my little hack here, Erin, is I go here and I'm like, tell me about commas. And I just go here, and here is the simple rule to master the Oxford comma. Here is quick punctuation tip, good grammar, like everything that involves commas on this channel, I can pull up and usually find something that helps me. This is High Value Writing on YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, please, after you subscribe to Dealcasters, which you should already, make sure you hit the subscribe button like we have on High Value Writing. So, yeah.
Yeah, Chris, Ashley Schmidt is over on Substack. She's an author who's watching, and she said that Erin, you are thorough. So you've got a fan.
I've never been
there.
called thorough, Erin. I've never ever been called thorough.
That's nice to hear, because I'm always worrying about not being too long. And so I'm glad, it's the same thing we're talking about, right? Balancing being thorough with still being kind of concise is our goal. In the workbook and in one of those videos, I advocate a process that I call now, later, never. It's actually, it sounds very simple, and it is, and yet it kind of is a game changer. And it's what the woman I was just talking about used when she resent that email about the leadership program. She looked at her original email and she said, okay, I have about a dozen things that I've said. And if you jot down those dozen things, you can just label them in your mind. Does my reader, not me, does my reader need this information right now in order to understand what I'm trying to do in this message? Or does my reader need this information later? Like if they say, yeah, I kind of like this, let's move forward, then I'll bring it up. Or if you're like me, a classic over-explainer, you'll have things in your message that your reader needs.
Right.
Never. You'll be labeling, and so you can label your points. Yeah, now, later, never.
We'll get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about Social Media News Live. Jeff C. and his amazing guests will keep you up to date on what's happening in this entire changing world of social media. They talk with industry experts and innovators and creators about the latest social media news, tips, and tactics, and they broadcast live, so you can ask the questions that matter most to you and your business. Jim and I love this show, and we know that you will too. Head over to socialmedianewslive.com. Hey, tell them Dealcasters sent you. Now back to the show.
Some people don't have nevers because they're sort of under-explainers, right? Most of us fall somewhere on a spectrum to not giving enough information that the reader wants to giving way too much, right? We want to try to be in the middle. And that's one of the ways to do that, is to really analyze through the eyes of the reader's actual need. Is this information needed in this current message, or could this either wait, or was this actually just something that I thought was cool, so I put it in there, but in reality, in their world, it's not necessary today, which kind of, relates back to one of Val's recent points on the chat was precision for engineers and clear specs, right? So in that mindset, I would think, I think this is cool. I think this background point is really important, but does this engineer need this background point right now? Right?
Yeah. Wow.
So it's through the eyes of what the reader needs.
And we have Gur Keys. Is it Jer? Is Gur? Is it Jer? Short for Jerry? I don't know. I don't want to slaughter anybody's name, so no offense. But with super practical advice, Erin. And Florence says, over-explainer support group.
Right. It's so common where people are finding like, yeah, I overwhelmed my reader, and then you got to just shorten it up. That's me.
Wow. Over-explainer support group. Yeah, that's a good one.
I think we have at least two that are joining that thing today. Jim, go ahead, Erin.
Well, I'll just throw in one more thing on that. If you're an over-explainer or an under-explainer and you're trying to get to the middle, I mentioned you could use now, later, never. Another thing you can do is your goal can be to share the 5 W's. Who, what, when, where, why. That is meeting in the middle. If you're an under-explainer, you can say to yourself, did I put all 5 W's? Oh, shoot, I forgot one. Let me add it. Now I'm probably good. If you're an over-explainer like me, you can try to limit yourself to the 5 W's and say, you know what? They're already there. I think I'm done with this email. I don't need another paragraph reiterating. So that's another tool you can use. Whether you tend to give too little or too much, try to meet in the middle at the 5 W's.
I recently sent an email that was I guess for lack of a better word, a pitch, and so for a program. And I think a lot of people, like if you're there's a lot of people who are influencers that watch and listen to this show, or they have some sort of influence, right? And they're doing something, product or service, and so I had put together an entire program, and it was fairly an elaborate program, and I had discussed it in advance with this other person, and this other person said, "Okay, I need you to send that to me, and in an email. I just need like something that I can absorb and take to my team." Okay. So I probably should have talked to you, Erin, before I sent this, but hopefully, hopefully it's a happy ending. I did get a positive response, just so you know. I'm sorry to keep this so vague, but it really needs to be vague at this point. So when I sent the email, I had, I would say, probably 7-page PDF of this, which went through in detail everything. And I was like, there's no way this person's going to read this. No way. Like, it's just too much, right? But I thought, if they needed it, right? If they needed it to reference it because they're taking it to a broader group of people, it needed to be included. So I included an executive summary at the top, and then below the executive summary, it was more of like a table of contents. Like, if you need this will hyperlink down to this spot in the PDF, and then you can go back up. It's more of a reference guide. And I attached that, and then in the email, I basically said, "Hey, we talked about it. Here it is. If you have any questions, I realize it's a lot of information for you, but I put a table of contents in there that you can just jump to the information that you need. Boom. Let me know what you think." Was that the right way to do that? Or would that have been, I mean, that's not exactly the wording that I used, but I wanted to be as succinct as possible in the body of the email, and then attach all of the, and I'm sure when this person opened up the PDF and saw that it was 7 pages, they were like, "Oh my gosh, I'm glad I'm glad he put a table of contents in here, because I'm never reading all this stuff."
Probably.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like what you said. I do have, yes. What I think you did is offer what I call optional information. And this is another tool that we can use to try to make a message brief and targeted, and yet also complete. We can, in the email body, keep the must-read brief, and then provide optional information. Usually I do that in 2 ways. And one is hyperlinks, right? Like, we know there's more behind this if I want to go learn what that word means, or what that program is, or what's been attached, or whatever it is. And the other way we can do optional information is simply by arrangement, where this comes up most often, I think, when we're writing to multiple people at once, and you're emailing 5 people, and 2 of them are on your very project, so they already know things, and 3 of them are not. So you have to give background, but then you're kind of like, what if I spend so long on the background that the people who already know bail on the message, thinking there wasn't something for them? Well, what about making that background optional information by just moving it down and opening up the email with, here's my point, here's my call to action for you. If you would like more background and context, it's below. Then you've got a paragraph with a heading. I'm always advocating headings and bullets in emails, right? Background. And then you provide that. Nobody has to read it in order to get to the action that you're asking for, which means it's much more likely they're going to do the thing you wanted, because you didn't put something like screenshots in the way of your ask, right? You didn't put your background there. So they were kind of like, oh my God, 2 paragraphs. I'm going to have to do this later. You still put what you wanted at the top. And so I think that your example, Chris, where you did a table of contents and an attachment, that's optional information. It's choose your own adventure. And that's great for a reader because, believe it or not, there are readers out there who want the details. Great. I had a meeting recently with another learning type, and she said, you know what? I love geeking out on this. You can make your proposals and emails as long as you want. I love the details about the classes. It doesn't happen often, but I had someone say that. And so I did. I was freewheeling it on that email, and it was longer than my usual. But I do typically try to arrange things in such a way where you get what you need right away, and the rest is potentially optional, depending on what the reader already knows, et cetera.
Information from that person. I'm sorry, Jim. Then you've got information from that person. So when you email them again, they want all the details. That's their love language, right? You can do that. Jim, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, it reminds me of when I was in the military. We call it bluff, bottom line up front. And so you're really doing that right away, because that way it's like, if they want the details, they can keep going. But I think it goes back to Erin's earlier example. If she had put her two ask up front, right? Even if it was two, they would have gotten to it. But it's like people, right? Short attention span theater. If you bury it, like, that's what would happen, right? You go to your boss and be like, what, you expect me to read this? Right? It's like, tell me what it is you want. And we used to joke in the military as well, as people would come up with these presentations and they'd have 3 courses of action. What they wanted, an alternative, and what we would call the throwaway course of action. Because it's like, well, you got to give them 3 choices, and you just hope they never pick the one you really didn't want. So I think just by getting to the point and eliminating those other 2 options, right? I think that's more effective, and probably, in writing, that's what we need to think about. Is like, what is it I really want these people to do? And I love the idea of, right? I guess is the term, if you're not an over an explainer or an under an explainer, are you an explainer?
Maybe so. You're neutral level, just explaining.
We're going to get right back to the show, but first I wanted to introduce you to the amazing Cloudlifter CL1 from Cloud Microphones. This amazing little blue box boosts your dynamic podcast mic signal for pristine audio quality in just seconds. Jim and I love ours, and you can snag one of these CL1s or new Cloudlifter X's for yourself from the links in the show notes below. Elevate your audio content with the Cloudlifter. Now, back to the show.
But yeah, I think people call it bluff, bottom line up front. Some people call it blot, bottom line on top. It's the way to write today. We cannot assume that a reader is going to think, I wonder what the point is. Let me look through these 5 paragraphs and deduce it for myself. Probably we're too busy. And so we have to give that information to them right away. I think another way to think about that is who's doing the work with this message. And if I rewrote my message with a bluff, I did the work. And now you can receive it and read it. And it's kind of easy. But if I didn't do all of that, I'm leaving the work for you. And do we really want to trust our readers to do the work of figuring out what we meant when we know they're getting pulled away by a million
Those
different
are emails
things?
you never reply to.
And we just don't want to take the risk.
They just get stuff piled on top of them because you've asked somebody. Consideration is a huge thing that we have to think about when we're sending over something. Like, I don't think, as long as you are nice, polite, and you need something from somebody, put it up front. Like, please, pretty please with sugar on top, whatever, thing. Because I think a lot of times, Erin, do you think like people are too not selfish, but like they're also thinking like, I want to get this person's attention so they can get this thing done. Right. And one of the things I don't know if this bothers you or not, Erin, but this is a huge pebble in my shoe. And that is when somebody sends an email to me and the first thing they say is quick question, because I will tell you whether or not it is a quick answer, because when someone says quick question, what they want is a quick answer from me. And it may not be a quick answer, right? So like, to me, that feels inconsiderate. Is that, what am I the only one here that feels like quick question just like is just a thorn in my shoe?
We're going to get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about the game changer for your audio setup. Of course, it's the one and only Shure SM7B microphone. This iconic beauty is a go-to for top-notch podcasts. You've seen it on streams. It's the perfect microphone for any environment. You don't need a fancy studio. It's got built-in protection that handles background noise like a pro. Jim and I love ours, and you can level up your audio game today. Just check out the show notes for the links. Now back to the show.
Well, I have said it before, and now I recognize your point. I think that that's a good point where I would maybe consider it to be an accidental assumption. That, because one thing readers hate is when we make assumptions about them. And that would be, oh, I'm accidentally assuming that this will be quick, but I didn't really check if that's true in your world. And the other thing you made me think about with that opener is just over the last year, and it kind of surprised me, honestly, because I know people are really looking for brevity now and not a bunch of fluff. Lots of people in the last year have said to me, don't I need to say hi in an email though? And I go, yeah, probably, you know. And a lot of people have told me that they receive emails where someone does not say hi and that they feel impacted by it. They don't like it. So even in today's world of sort of quick back and forth, I've probably at least 10 people have said that in the last year. It bothers them when we don't take a moment to say hi before we get into like quick question or the ask. That's not true if you're partway down an email chain and you're going back and forth, no biggie, right? But if you're coming out of the blue, first time you're interacting that day, it's grating on people a little bit.
It's true. It's so true because it's like, hey, I need this from you right now, right? And I think the assumption can be that, hey, you've already shown me that this is easy for you to do, right? Like, it's the blessing and the curse of doing what we do, Erin, is like, you know, we put on shows, we do productions, we do podcasts, we do all this other stuff. And I like to make it, you know, for my clients, I like to, like, it probably looks like it's, like, I make it look easy, right? But that is actually a curse when somebody goes, hey, I need you to make sure that you're adding these 4 things to the live stream with 5 minutes before we go live. Why do they ask that? Like, they don't understand that this is something that will probably take me 17 minutes to do, and I can't do it before we go live, right? I'll certainly try to do it. And so it's like, it's that, hey, I've got a quick question for you, Erin, because I know that you provide this information already, right? But maybe you put it behind a paywall. Maybe it's like, you know, all of those kinds of things. There are accidental assumptions, like you talk about, and so it all goes into that. Hey, let's think about my audience before I kind of toss this over, you know, the email interwebs on that.
Yeah, and I often say to people, there's that phrase, imagine the real for your reader. And so when we think about our reader, we might think, who are they? What do they need right now? But what we might not think about is what are their daily hour-to-hour realities that they're dealing with. Imagining the real, imagining for you, what would it take to add those 5 things at the last minute? Or if I'm asking, recently I had written a whole email to somebody and then I remembered, oh, right, their team has a massive deadline tomorrow. This is a really, you know, unproductive moment for me to send this email. I'm going to wait till after that project is done because it's not going to help me or them have email now. So imagining the real, you know, what might that person be dealing with can also help us with those decisions. Right. And so we're right. That's the other cool thing about focusing on your reader is when we don't focus on our reader, then most of the decisions we have to make in our writing feel very arbitrary. You know, what order should I say my thoughts in? I don't know. A, B, C, B, C, A, who knows? When you think about your reader, I'm going to start with what's most relevant to them. So I no longer have sort of a random approach to my writing. And so thinking of your reader can actually give you answers about what decisions to make in your writing.
Okay, so
that you don't feel like you're just taking a shot in the dark.
Informational and relational thing and saying and making sure that what are my goals in this conversation, right? And I have to deliver information, but I want to make sure that this person doesn't think I'm a jerk. And I want to build that relationship and then be able to frame that around by using the ABC approach. Erin, we didn't spend a ton of time on AI, and I feel like we should have, but I love to nerd out on this on the writing, because I feel like this kind of stuff is so important to utilizing AI. So if you're starting with a blank page and you're going and you're generating content, it could be any content. It could be a blog. It could be, show notes for a podcast. It could be any of that kind of stuff. The kind of stuff we're talking about also relates to this. And Val here says AI can imitate, but it doesn't feel. Readers often sense when something is too polished or generic. Humans pick up on the subtleties of empathy, humor, vulnerability, and lived experience. So if we could kind of go back to AI here a bit and really kind of like, maybe for the remainder of our time together, kind of talk about this kind of stuff and what Val's talking about, because I think it's important for us to, when we're getting all of this content and it's full of rocket emojis and delving and all of these fun little words we've never said before, but it really looks great. Like, hey, this is some great content I can use all of a sudden.
Okay.
What that can do for us, for our brands, and what we want to accomplish in the long term. Any thoughts on that?
Okay. Yeah. Well, and I like the way Val put this, where we might not know we're picking up on it, but subconsciously as humans, we're all about cooperation. So we might subconsciously notice, this doesn't have any human vulnerability or something like that. And I think it can be a turnoff. I did have a few people say in that webinar that they forgive us all for using AI. They know that it's a helpful tool. People don't feel like, well, I'm mad at you because you used AI. But when we leave the message sort of tonally inept or not appropriate to the specific relationship or not showing that empathy or vulnerability, people do notice.
Yeah.
And they're starting to feel farther away, right? Like, oh, this doesn't pertain. This is just a generic thing describing this topic, but it's not really for me. And by the way, it's kind of hilarious what you said, because in that webinar, I think we had about 170 people. So whenever we did a poll, it was, some decent data, right? And I had a poll up about what are the biggest giveaways. And people said that one of the biggest giveaways was sort of the over enthusiasm, over formality, over repeating a lot. And then somebody put in the chat, because I did not have it in my poll, they said that their biggest tell is that dang rocket ship emoji that you just mentioned.
Thanks AI for killing the rocket emoji.
I know this came from AI because I was a rocket ship.
Apparently everyone now is deep diving and delving, and everything's a game changer, and everything, thanks for killing the rocket emoji. We appreciate that. I don't think there's anything wrong with being tactical. I think too many people are just throwing everything into this pile. And you talked about it earlier, Erin, rising above the noise. And it's even more imperative now to do that. And it's hard when you see all of this other stuff and you get that fear of missing out, and you go, look at all this stuff that I'm not doing that I should be doing. And if I hit this easy button, then I have more stuff, and all of a sudden there's a blog on my website, and I'm able to do this, and I can automate this and automate that. But I think there's a long-term risk, right? Because the internet writes in pen. Last time I checked.
Yeah, it's true. It sticks around. People can go back and notice And it's another balancing act, which writing is all about. But yeah, it's tempting, excuse me, to think, oh, if I could only put up, a 10 paragraph article every week, things would be so much better. But what if every article was alienating a couple readers and you didn't even realize, right? So there's a balance. And so I don't think that we have to approach it as all yes or all no. If I were writing something where I needed a little help and I'm going to get a couple ideas from AI, maybe I'll use that paragraph for part of my email where I'm just explaining a little timeline. But if I also have a part of that email where I'm being empathetic about a personal relationship, I'll just write that part myself. So pick and choose. We don't want our whole message or our whole article to sound like bot speak, as people might say, right? Because then it can send a message they didn't care to personalize this for me. And it can then, separate from your reader more. But I think by being choosy, I'll use AI to help me be clear and concise. But when it's an important moment, like I'm supporting this person with something they told me was a really difficult project, let me write that paragraph myself. And they'll feel, oh, that's a personal relationship, right? So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And it doesn't have to stomp on our personal relationships, even if we do use it as
said, we're not thinking about potentially what people are being alienated by this content, right? So we're thinking like, look how much more attention I might be getting, but we're not thinking about if we're taking that content, who might look at it and go, I don't trust this person anymore because this doesn't feel, look, and sound like the person that I had been following all along.
Yes, exactly. And that was the number one thing. I didn't even mention it when we were talking about the rocket ship emoji. And I said about the giveaways of AI, people, very enthusiastic words and things like that. The winner of that poll was actually what you said. It doesn't sound like the person I know. And so, that's not relevant when we don't know each other. But you're making a great point that even if we don't know each other through email, but you've been following someone, you very well know their tone and personality. And so it can feel very much like I didn't care to take the time with you if all of a sudden that tone and personality is gone.
It's one of the worst things
so
that I think can happen for someone who has some sort of, influence, where you're a YouTuber or you're a, I don't know, you could be a musician or whatever. And I think there's, if you're putting yourself out there on video and you're a certain way and you have a certain way, and then you actually meet that person in real life and they're not that person, right? They're just not that person. And I get it. Like if you're introverted, and and maybe you're turning it up a notch when you do that. I totally get that. But like you're just not the person at all that I thought you were. It kind of goes back to as an editor, which is what I do a lot. I do it every day. I take videos and I edit them. And I've had some clients, Erin, that will say, hey, take out all the ums, or take out all the knows, take out this, that, and the other. And by the time I took out all of that stuff, it doesn't sound like that person at all. And I finally just had to go, listen, here it is like you want it,
natural,
right? But I'm going to tell you what I think. This doesn't sound like you. And that's going to hurt you in the long run. So I think what we could do is if that person is not happy with their ums, not happy with their filler words, well, work on your delivery, right? Work on that. And then obvious edits like coughs,
right?
Whatever, we can take those out. But, when it comes to, and I'm an machine, nobody can like me, Erin. I promise you. Put me on, in an contest, I'll win every time. But that's how I talk. And if someone has a problem with all my ums, okay, I guess I guess someone does. Someone's gonna have a problem with something. So I'm not gonna worry about it. And I think building trust with your writing is like the whole reason why we're doing it, really, right? Or one of the biggest reasons.
Right. Yes, I agree. And, we can think of playing the long game, it takes a little more time to check whether the AI draft sounded like you or to write it yourself with just a tool here and there. But we're playing the long game. We want people to trust us long term and build a real relationship, not just get through my task list today. And you know what you made me think of, Chris, when you were talking about how you might listen to someone and read them, and then all of a sudden you get this thing that's not them at all. It makes me think that AI writing and that mismatch is almost like what we used to call sort of like someone had a professional headshot or even a dating site headshot. And you're like, was that 30 years ago? Is that? And then you meet them in person, right? So if we imagine that, don't we want to avoid that feeling where somebody goes, oh, this is you?
Yeah.
I thought it was this other thing that you had created as another persona almost.
That's a great point. Wow.
Don't make people surprised when they finally meet you, right?
Chris, that happened with Jeff Sheehan. The first time I met him in person, it was like I had been connected with him, and I told him this guy, he's got hundreds of thousands of followers on X, but his headshot was probably he didn't have gray hair, right? And he's got a full head of gray hair, and it actually made him change his picture because I was like, oh, I didn't know it was you, right? And realtors, I think, are really guilty of that, but that's a whole nother story.
Well, and the flip side of Jim's example there is that we can also use our authentic writing to get to know each other without ever even meeting. So even today is an example, right? I had only met Chris, but Jim and I have exchanged LinkedIn messages and kind of written to each other a little bit since we scheduled this. So when I walked in here, I already felt comfortable with both of you. I already felt like, hey, we know what's up. We know what we're doing. We've already been connected. And so you can use your writing intentionally to create a new relationship. And that's another moment when you might think, I'm not going to let AI do this part for me because I'm trying to make a relationship with this person.
Right.
So that when we do get to work on a project together, we already have trust, or whatever it is.
To close the time that we have together, Erin, this has been, we can go for 3 more hours for sure. I know we covered the gamut of everything, but we didn't get into texts. We touched on emojis. I'm glad we got the exclamation point thing, but I knew we were going to spend a lot of time on AI. And Erin, I appreciate everything. Again, I'm not blowing smoke and saying that I haven't gotten a ton of value out of your content. I have, and I hope that our audience did. In fact, I know they did. And I just want to tell you, I appreciate you making our show better today. Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to it. It's always fun to work together, and it's been great to talk with both of you today and get to share these ideas about really just the reality that we face when we write in today's world, and we're writing to someone who's another living human being. So thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the comments and questions that we got in the chat. That was wonderful.
And for those of you who are listening and watching, go to highvaluewriting.com, browse the e-courses. I'm telling you, there is a ton of stuff to get that's free, but of course, there's some stuff if you want the real high value, the high premium value. There's some stuff there as well, and then of course, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, High Value Writing, as well, which is at High Value Writing. Florence, we appreciate you stopping by. Florence says there's lots to go back and study. Yes, there is, and. How did you do this, Erin? Erin, you not only are you delivering all this value, but somehow High Value Writing support is chiming in and thanking for all the great. Yeah, I know.
That's somebody else.
The best team. Thanks for chiming in and joining us today. And as always, everyone, don't fear the gear.
Thanks for listening to Dealcasters. Congratulations, you've taken another step forward in your content creation journey. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe or follow button here in your favorite podcast player so you can be reminded every time we drop an episode.
We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. And if you're wanting to watch our shows live on Amazon, feel free to follow Dealcasters Live as well at dealcasters.live. Follow us on Twitter or subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we also included added content that you cannot find anywhere else.
If you have questions about this episode or have something you want us to review, you can also email us at dealcasters@dealcasters.live. Thanks again for listening, and you know the deal. Don't fear the gear.